In 1974, Henry Kissinger flew to Saudi Arabia and made a deal that most Americans have never heard of. Not because it was unimportant, because it was made in secret. No press conference, no public announcement. The details were classified for decades, and when a journalist finally got the documents in 2016, most people couldn't believe what they were reading. Because what was agreed to in that room quietly determined the price of your rent, your mortgage rate, and every gallon of gas you've ever bought. And right now, for the first time in 50 years, that deal is falling apart. But to understand why Kissinger was even in that room, we need to go back 3 years earlier, to 1971, because that's when the problem started. For most of the 20th century, the US dollar had something real behind it. Every dollar in circulation was backed by gold, physical gold, sitting in American vaults. If you held dollars, you were essentially holding a claim on that gold. Other countries knew this. That's why they trusted the dollar. That's why global trade ran on it. Then, on August 15, 1971, President Nixon went on television and changed everything. He announced that the dollar would no longer be convertible to gold. He called it temporary. That was 55 years ago. Overnight, the dollar became backed by nothing but a government promise. And that created a very serious problem. Because if you're sitting in Saudi Arabia pumping millions of barrels of oil every single day, and the Americans want you to sell that oil for a currency they can now print without limit, why would you say yes? That's not a trade. That's handing over your oil for someone else's paper. The oil-producing nations understood this immediately, and by 1973, things had gotten critical. Arab nations imposed an oil embargo on the US. Prices quadrupled. Americans waited in line for hours at gas stations. The economy was in shock. The White House knew. If the world stopped believing in the dollar, America was finished. They needed a solution, fast. Nixon's decision in 1971 had created a massive hole in the global financial system. Kissinger's job was to fill it. In June 1974, Henry Kissinger arrived in Riyadh with a proposal. He wasn't there as a tourist. He was there because the United States had a problem that couldn't be solved with military force or diplomatic pressure. It could only be solved with a deal. The proposal was straightforward. Saudi Arabia would price its oil exclusively in US dollars. Every barrel, every transaction, no exceptions. In return, the United States would guarantee Saudi Arabia's military security. American weapons, American protection. A permanent security umbrella over the kingdom. But there was a third piece that most people don't know about. The Petro-Dollars. The billions of dollars that Saudi Arabia would earn from oil sales would be recycled back into US Treasury bonds, meaning Saudi Arabia would take its oil profits and lend them back to the United States government. Washington gets cheap financing, Riyadh gets security, and the dollar gets something it desperately needed after losing its gold backing, a new anchor. Saudi Arabia said yes. Then OPEC followed. And then the entire global oil market reorganized itself around the US dollar. Think about what this actually meant. Every country on Earth needs energy to function. Factories, transportation, agriculture, heating, all of it runs on oil. And now every country that wanted to buy oil had to first acquire US dollars. Not euros, not gold, dollars. The demand was permanent, structural, and global. The United States had found a way to make the whole world need its currency, not because of gold sitting in a vault, but because of oil flowing through pipelines. The Petrodollar system was born. And for the next 5 decades, it ran quietly in the background, invisible to most people, keeping the dollar at the center of the global financial system. Most Americans went through their entire lives without ever hearing the word petrodollar. They just knew that their money felt powerful. Imports were cheap. Interest rates were manageable. The standard of living kept rising. They didn't know why. They didn't need to. But here's the thing about systems built on secret agreements. They don't last forever. Nobody announces the end of a financial era. It happens gradually, through small cracks that most people don't notice until the damage is already done. The first crack appeared in February 2022. Russia invaded Ukraine. The US and its allies responded by freezing Russia's foreign currency reserves, roughly $300 billion in assets that Russia had saved up over decades. Locked, inaccessible, overnight. Now here's why that mattered beyond Russia. Every finance minister on Earth watched that happen, and every one of them had the same thought. We keep our reserves in dollars too. We hold US Treasury bonds. We park our savings in the American financial system. And if Washington decides it doesn't like something we do, what's stopping them from doing the same to us? The answer, it turned out, was nothing. Central banks around the world didn't panic. They didn't make announcements. They just quietly started diversifying, buying more gold, exploring alternative payment systems, reducing exposure to US assets, slowly, carefully, but consistently. The second crack came in 2023. Saudi Arabia, the same country that sat across from Kissinger in 1974 and built this entire system, sold oil to China, not in dollars, in Chinese yuan, for the first time in 5 decades. No press conference, just a transaction. But everyone in global finance understood exactly what it meant. The third crack, June 2024, the original Petro-Dollar agreement expired. Saudi Arabia chose not to renew it. When this became public, several media outlets called it misinformation. It wasn't. The deal was done. 50 years after Kissinger's visit, the agreement quietly died. And then 2026 arrived. On February 28th, the Iran war began. Within days, Iran did something that sent shockwaves through every finance ministry and central bank on the planet. They effectively closed the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway at the mouth of the Persian Gulf that carries 20% of the world's entire oil and gas supply every single day. Ships from Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, Qatar, all of them had to pass through Hormuz to reach global markets, and suddenly they couldn't. The Strait of Hormuz, the same waterway that handles a third of the world's fertilizer trade, the trade that feeds an estimated 3.5 billion people, had effectively shut down overnight. The economic model that the petrodollar was built around had just lost its foundation. While the world was watching missile strikes and ceasefire negotiations, China was doing something far more calculated. Let's look at the timeline of what happened in April 2026. Because the sequence of events is not a coincidence, it's a strategy. April 14th, the Crown Prince of the UAE flies to Beijing for a personal meeting with Xi Jinping. April 15th, the UAE and China signed 24 separate trade and investment agreements in a single day. Their bilateral trade target? Over $100 billion. April 19th, the Wall Street Journal publishes a report that the UAE has warned Washington it may start pricing oil in yuan if it runs short on dollars due to the Iran war. April 28th, the UAE announces it is leaving OPEC after 60 years of membership. The sequence is deliberate. The UAE locked in the China relationship first, signed the deals, established the alternative, and then made the phone call to Washington. That's not diplomacy, that's leverage. And it worked immediately. Trump went on CNBC and called the UAE a good country and a good ally. The Treasury Secretary went before the Senate and endorsed emergency dollar swap lines for Gulf states. And in doing so, he said something remarkable. He explained that the swap lines were necessary to prevent Gulf nations from selling their US assets in a disorderly way. In other words, these countries hold so much American debt and so many American assets that if they start selling, US markets destabilize. The most powerful financial system in history was being held at ransom, and Washington blinked. But here's what made this possible. China hadn't improvised any of this. They had been preparing for years. In 2013, China held $1.3 trillion in US Treasury bonds. By November 2025, that number had fallen to $682 billion. They cut their exposure in half over 12 years. No announcement, no drama. While the financial media was focused on trade wars and tech competition, China was quietly reducing its dependence on American debt and building alternatives. One of those alternatives is a payment system called mBridge. Think of it as China's answer to SWIFT, the global network that processes international financial transactions. In March 2026, mBridge processed the equivalent of $178 billion in a single day, entirely outside the US banking system, entirely outside American oversight or control. And then there's the economics. Borrowing money in yuan right now costs 60% less than borrowing in dollars. Chinese interest rates sit at 1.82%. US rates are at 4.46%. Countries aren't abandoning the dollar because they have some ideological problem with America. They're doing it because the numbers make sense. When the alternative is dramatically cheaper and the dominant system has shown it's willing to weaponize access, the math becomes very simple. China understood something that most Western analysts missed. You don't defeat a reserve currency by attacking it. You build an alternative, make it attractive, wait for the dominant system to make enough mistakes, and then you're ready when the moment comes. The Iran war was that moment, and China was ready. Here's something that sounds like a conspiracy theory, but is actually documented in real time. During the Iran war, there was a number that kept appearing, 4.4%, the yield on the 10-year U.S. Treasury bond. And every single time that number was approached, something strange happened. March 22nd, Trump threatens to bomb Iranian electrical infrastructure. Bond yields move toward 4.4%. Investors get nervous and demand higher returns to keep lending money to the U.S. government. The next morning, Trump backs off. March 24th, yields hit 4.4% again. Trump announces a potential peace deal. March 25th, Iran denies the talks. Yields move higher. March 26th, yields hit 4.4% again. Trump immediately extends the pause on military strikes. Every single time the bond market sent that signal, pay us more or we stop buying your debt, the most powerful military in the world stood down. Not because of battlefield conditions, not because of diplomatic pressure, because of a number on a financial screen. What this tells you is something that would have seemed unthinkable 20 years ago. The US government is so deep in debt, $39 trillion as of March 2026, and so dependent on global investors continuing to buy its bonds at manageable rates, that the bond market has effectively acquired veto power over American foreign policy. When investors decide the US is too risky, they demand higher yields. Higher yields mean the government's borrowing costs explode. And at $39 trillion in debt, even a small increase in borrowing costs adds hundreds of billions of dollars to the annual interest bill. The Petro-Dollar system was supposed to prevent exactly this situation. As long as oil-producing nations were recycling petrodollars into treasury bonds, there was always a guaranteed buyer keeping yields low and U.S. borrowing cheap. That guaranteed buyer is gone. And now the U.S. is discovering what it means to need the bond market's permission to act. Iran understood this. Keeping Hormuz closed keeps oil prices elevated. Elevated oil prices drain Gulf state dollar reserves. Draining reserves forces Gulf states to consider selling U.S. assets. Selling U.S. assets pushes bond yields higher. Higher bond yields constrain U.S. military options. It's not a military strategy, it's a financial one, and it's working. The average American family spent $11,000 more in 2026 than they did in 2020. Same lifestyle, same habits, different system. The petrodollar system created something that Americans took for granted for 50 years without ever realizing it existed. It created permanent global demand for US dollars. And that demand had a direct, concrete effect on your everyday life, even if nobody ever explained the connection. When the whole world needs dollars to buy oil, the dollar stays strong. A strong dollar means imports are cheap. The electronics you buy, the clothes you wear, the food that travels across oceans to reach your grocery store, all of it cheaper than it would otherwise be. Americans got to consume more than they produced for decades, and the rest of the world absorbed the difference because they needed dollars to function. Economists call this the exorbitant privilege. Most Americans just called it Tuesday. But that privilege doesn't disappear quietly. It shows up in your bills first. When global demand for dollars weakens, the dollar weakens with it. A weaker dollar means imports cost more. That's inflation. Not the kind caused by one bad harvest or one supply chain disruption, but the slow structural kind that doesn't go away because the underlying cause doesn't go away. The kind where you look at your grocery receipt in 2026 and compare it to 2021 and wonder what happened. This is part of what happened. There's also the interest rate problem. The petrodollar gave the US government a guaranteed buyer for its debt. Oil-producing nations that recycled their petrodollars straight into U.S. Treasury bonds. That permanent demand kept U.S. borrowing costs low, which kept mortgage rates low, which kept car loan rates manageable, which kept the cost of carrying credit card debt from being completely ruinous. As that guaranteed buyer weakens, as Saudi Arabia diversifies, as China cuts its treasury holdings in half, as Gulf states start asking for yuan deals instead of dollar deals, the U.S. has to offer higher interest rates to attract other buyers. And those higher rates flow downstream into every loan you carry, your mortgage, your car, your student debt. The connection is direct, even if it's invisible. None of this happens overnight. That's actually the most dangerous part. It's gradual enough that most people don't connect the cause to the effect. They just notice that everything costs more, that rates stay higher than expected, that the raise they got didn't feel like a raise because prices moved faster. The petrodollar didn't just give America geopolitical power, It gave ordinary Americans a standard of living that was quietly underwritten by the rest of the world. And for 50 years, almost nobody knew it. Now the bill is starting to arrive. So what do you actually do with this information? Nobody can tell you exactly what comes next. The petrodollar system isn't collapsing tomorrow, but the direction is clear, and the people managing national economies are already acting on it. For ordinary people, the principle is simple. Dollar-denominated cash sitting idle loses purchasing power when the dollar weakens. Real assets, property, commodities, broadly diversified investments, tend to hold value across currency shifts. The specifics depend on your situation, but the underlying logic is the same one the smartest money in the world is following right now. The system is shifting. The question isn't whether to pay attention, it's how early you start. There's one signal worth paying attention to above everything else. Central banks, the institutions that manage the financial reserves of entire nations, are buying gold at the fastest pace in 50 years. Not US Treasury bonds, not dollars, gold. In 2022, 2023, and 2024, central banks collectively purchased over 1,000 metric tons of gold annually, 3 years in a row. That has never happened before in recorded financial history. These are not impulsive decisions. Central banks move slowly, deliberately, and with enormous caution. When the most conservative financial institutions on the planet all start doing the same thing at the same time, it's worth asking why. The answer is that they're preparing for a world where the dollar is one option among several, not the only option. Where oil trades in multiple currencies. Where the global financial plumbing runs through more than one system. That world doesn't exist fully yet, but the people who manage national economies are already positioning for it. China cut its US Treasury holdings from $1.3 trillion to $682 billion and spent years building alternative payment infrastructure. Russia settled energy trades in yuan and rubles after its reserves were frozen. Saudi Arabia let the Petro-Dollar agreement expire without renewal. The UAE just left OPEC and signed 24 trade deals with Beijing in a single day. None of these are isolated events. They're pieces of the same shift happening across different continents simultaneously. The petrodollar system ran quietly for half a century. It shaped what your money was worth, what your savings could buy, and what the future looked like for anyone living in the United States. Most people never knew it existed. They just lived inside it, benefiting from it without understanding where the benefit came from. That system is changing, not collapsing tomorrow, not ending next week, but shifting, the way tectonic plates shift. Slowly, invisibly, and then all at once. The only question is simple. Do you see it before you feel it?